Hi everyone, this is Cyril Gruter. I'm a biological anthropologist, and today I'm going to talk about preferential treatment of relatives. Why do we show preferential treatment of relatives? So let's start with the problem of altruism. Altruism can be defined as any act that confers a benefit on the recipient of the act at some cost to the donor. So in evolutionary terms, these costs and benefits are measured in terms of reproductive success or fitness. So that's the number of copies of a gene that are passed on to succeeding generations. Now, altruism creates something of a problem for the theory of natural selection, which is based on competition between individuals rather than on caring for each other and helping each other, or more specifically, a behavior which entails helping others to increase their reproductive success at the expense of one's own should not have been favored by selection. But if you look at what's happening in the animal world, you can see that this is not really the case. So here's an example. These are prairie dogs. They give alarm calls to warn other individuals about potential predators, although this greatly increases their own risk of being spotted by a predator themselves. How do we explain that behavior? Well, one answer to the apparent paradox of altruistic behavior was provided by a famous biologist called Bill Hamilton. He showed that fitness benefits can accrue to those who preferentially help their relatives or kin. So this is because fitness is actually measured in terms of the number of copies of a gene that are passed on to subsequent generations rather than just the number of offspring produced. So individuals can increase their fitness in two ways. They can directly pass genes on to their own offspring, or they can indirectly do that by aiding the reproduction of other individuals who likely carry the same gene. So this implies that individuals should only behave altruistically toward those individuals with whom they likely share a given gene. So these are kin. And they should favor more closely related individuals over less closely related individuals. So an organism's fitness is made up of two components. It's direct fitness and indirect fitness, which combined give a measure known as inclusive fitness. So let's take a look at this illustration here. You can see the impact of the actor's behavior, the yellow hands, on its reproductive success. So these are the yellow offspring. And this is the direct fitness effect. Now, the impact of the actor's behavior, the yellow hands, on the reproductive success of social partners, so these are the blue offspring, weighted by the relatedness of the actor to the recipient, that's the letter R here, that's the indirect fitness effect. So this theory is also known as kin selection. So now we have an explanation for the selfless behavior of our prairie dogs. The people studying these guys found that individual prairie dogs are more likely to alarm call when close relatives were nearby, and they were least likely to call when there are only unrelated individuals present to hear them. So prairie dogs are thus prepared to take a risk if it will increase their inclusive fitness, but they tend to be quiet if this isn't the case. So if we are to accept that the theory of kin selection applies to humans, then on average we should expect people to behave more altruistically toward their relatives than to unrelated individuals. Is that the case? Well, we know from both modern and traditional societies that relatives help each other with all sorts of things, for example, gardening work, caring for offspring, and sharing food. Now, let me give you a few examples of kin selection in human societies. Here's a study that analyzed Canadian wills, and they found that wealth was usually handed on to lineal descendants and rarely to less closely related collateral relatives or unrelated individuals. And this may even mean excluding spouses in order to benefit children. Here's another study that looked at the relatedness of Inuit whaling crews, and they found that crew members were rather closely related. So the risks of being thrown into the water are quite high, so the crews consist of close kin. That's because only close relatives are willing to dive into the icy Arctic waters to rescue you if you get thrown out of the boat. So the empirical support for Hamilton's rule or kin selection is quite overwhelming. Here's another example. In this study, they examined people's willingness to help others. For low-cost help, such as emotional support, people helped friends more than siblings. For medium-cost help, for example, financial help or help during an illness, they helped siblings and friends roughly equally. But for high-cost help, such as donating a kidney, they expressed a much greater willingness to help siblings than friends. There's even a difference in how willing we are to help a full sibling versus a half sibling. This study explored the degree of solidarity felt between full and half siblings who were raised in a Mormon polygamous community. So this community actively promotes harmonious family living together in one household and solidarity among all siblings, irrespective of whether they are full or half siblings. But despite this ethos of harmonious family life and the close physical proximity of half-sibling in the family, there was more solidarity between full siblings than between half-siblings. And you can see that in this graph here. You can see the measure of solidarity here and the percentage of support given to full siblings versus half-siblings. And again, there was more solidarity between full siblings than between half siblings. And there's also experimental evidence for Hamilton's rule. So in this study here, the subjects were asked to perform a skiing exercise in return for a cash reward. So what they had to do is they had to adopt a sitting position with the back against the wall, and the hips and knees were bent at right angles, and they basically take the full weight of the body. So the longer you can maintain that position, the larger the cash reward. So this position is reasonably comfortable for about, I don't know, 60 seconds, but becomes increasingly painful thereafter. So the subjects were asked to perform this exercise on successive days. On each day, a specific individual was selected to be the recipient of the cash reward, and the recipients varied by relatedness. So the time the subject sustained their pain was directly related to the recipient's relatedness. So they were willing to suffer more for themselves than for their siblings, and more for their siblings than for an unrelated individual. And kin selection is also very common. It's also a common organizing principle in primate societies. So here's an example from my own research. These are rhesus macaques, which live in a very harsh environment in northern China. One day, an infant lost her mom. And then what happened? Well, the orphaned infant was adopted by her older sister. That's an example of kin support. So to sum up, we've seen that a lot of cooperative behavior out there can be explained with kin selection. But there's also cooperation among non-relatives or even complete strangers. And we'll discuss these phenomena in a separate video. Thank you very much for listening, and see you next time.